off.
All right, yeah, it's 4 o'clock, so let's go ahead and do that.
All right.
Okay, so it's redirecting to live streaming now. Okay, so I'm seeing it on YouTube.
Cool. Yeah, go ahead and close that window so we don't get feedback. It's going to start playing the live event back to you.
Yes.
All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Devin Hogan. I've had the pleasure to serve as your Minneapolis DFL chair since 2018. And as a person who's voted Democratic their entire life, a farmer who runs a cooperative market garden on Nicollet Avenue, and a laborer who serves as the parliamentarian of my union's local, I'm very proud to call myself a DFLer. Also during this Pride Month, I'm very super proud to be out as a queer and non-binary person. And I want to say that representation matters and I see you. As your party chair, I've helped to spearhead the effort to reinvent the caucuses from scratch and put them on the internet this year due to COVID. We've more than doubled our caucus turnout from 2017. And to my knowledge, 2021 has been the best attended caucus in decades, with a notable exception of 2016. I do want to give a special kudos and thanks to the members of the Minneapolis DFL Central Committee and to the 60 participating campaigns citywide seeking endorsement this year for all the time we've spent together since last October to put this all together and make it work. Also special shout out to our ward committees who are putting on these events today. And thank you also to everyone who's attending live or recorded during this hot summer Sunday. The purpose of these events is for you to get to know the candidates better and to give the candidates an opportunity to have more time to explain why they are seeking your support. We sent a form out for all delegates to submit questions, and these questions will be used for a candidate forum in the second part of today's event. Now, as the party chair, the endorsement is actually my favorite part of all the work that we do, because it's Democrats agreeing that this is the person who most supports our values as Democrats. In a big tent, there's always going to be disagreements, but endorsement emphasizes coming together. I think that's pretty cool, and it's something we should celebrate. Now, my second favorite part is that I get to flex on how your ward has influenced my life in Minneapolis and how it's meaningful to me. And so for Ward 12, I'm very pleased to say I used to work at Sea Salt in Minnehaha Park. And I know that's a big reason why a lot of you live in Ward 12. And man, it was very cool to work in a park every day. I absolutely loved the setting and was glad to see a lot of friends always waiting in line to eat some fried food and drink some beers. So moving on, I have to now go on to the contractually obligated part to pass the hat. Minneapolis DFL is 100% volunteer run and sustained on small dollar donations. Right now, our average donation is around $23 and every bit helps us do the work. You can donate any amount at minneapolisdfl.org/donate. That's minneapolisdfl.org/donate. And if you haven't given to a political candidate or party this year, you can get up to $50 of your donation refunded via the Minnesota Political Contribution Refund Program. Now, finally, I just want to close out by explaining how your ballots work this year. So all of the ballots are the same citywide just due to the COVID year. And so the way our ranked choice voting works is ranked choice only narrows down until there's 2 candidates and no endorsement left. But because there's only 2 candidates seeking endorsement in this race, your ballot will only have 2 candidates and no endorsement on it. So therefore, just be aware, essentially your first vote is your only vote in this particular case. Like I said, it's presented as ranked choice because the rules are the same citywide, but just be aware that essentially your one vote is your one vote in this particular ward. Also, too, wanted to let you know that you can vote as many times as you'd like, and we will only accept the final vote that you've taken before 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday evening. So that's it for me. Thanks again, everyone. I'll pass it along to our ward co-chairs, Eric and Joanne.
Thank you, Devin. Yeah, I'm Eric Ferguson. Joanne, did you want to introduce yourself? Oh, you're muted. Go ahead. I'm going to guess technical difficulties. So Joanne and I are the ward coordinators. Just to get all disclosures out of the way, we haven't endorsed candidates in any of the races just to make sure everything is completely neutral and transparent and above board. What we're thinking is that, well, this event is mostly for the council candidates in Ward 12. Ward 12 is entirely within Park Board District 5, so we're giving some speaking time to the candidates for Park Board District 5, Charles Rogers and Stephanie Musich. So, Charles, you're already here. Would you like to take a couple of minutes and go first? And Joanne will be acting as the timekeeper.
Sure, sure. My name is Charles Rogers. I'm running for District 5. I was a little bit about myself. I was raised in Memphis, Tennessee by a single mom, Sally Francis, who always took me to the parks, you know, and that's where I learned about sports and how to play sports. I moved to Minneapolis in 1980 to go to graduate school at the university. Also after I came here, I started working at St. Joseph's Home for Children. I've had a lot of, you know, work with kids. I worked in the psych ward at Abbott Northwestern. Right after that, I opened my first business here, which was a distribution business. I've owned that for 35 years. I also owned a couple of restaurants, one here and one in Costa Rica. I've been on numerous boards. I was on the board of De La Salle. I was president of the Uptown Rotary Club. The reason I'm running, I mean, I've just seen so much that happened around the park board in the city. One of the main things that we've been dealing with is the groundwater problems around the creek. And we've spent hours and hours trying to, you know, come up with a solution to you know, to mitigate the water in South Minneapolis. I mean, there's a lot of seniors who are suffering, you know, with water in their basement, and most of them are on fixed income, so they don't have, you know, the money to fix these situations, and they're kind of being ignored by everybody. I mean, I'm kind of, you know, it's frightening that, you know, there's so many seniors in South Minneapolis who have water in their basement, and you know, to me, those are potential health hazards. And as I've watched the board, I mean, over the years, I mean, it's just, you know, I just think they need some strong leadership, and I've been around enough, you know, and I feel like I would bring something special to the board, you know, and I think I can work with people. And I just love working with kids. I mean, I've worked with kids all my life. I mean, I was a golf coach at South. I've coached junior basketball. And I just think we need to get back to the basics, what the parks are really for. And the parks are mostly, to me, we should be focusing on our kids. I mean, this pandemic has caused a lot of problems. And I'm afraid how our kids are going to react when they're back out in the system. I mean, there's so many problems going on in the city. We got the George Floyd thing. We got police brutality. We got the homelessness. And, you know, I look at the homeless situation. I mean, I volunteered a lot.
Charles, this is Joanne. Can I ask you to start wrapping up?
Sure.
Thank you.
No problem. I listen. Yeah, I listen. So, yeah, I just think I can bring, you know, some positive stuff to the board. I mean, I'm not afraid of the challenge. I mean, I've had to make big decisions most of my life and most of my business life. I mean, I've had over 90 people that worked for me over the years. So I know what I'm doing, and I think I bring a strong hand to the board. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and show Stephanie's, here it is.
Let me mute.
Okay, so I'll play so this is Stephanie Musich. Or it's a running circle anyway. Okay, I'm going to reload my browser.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Musich, your 5th District Park Commissioner. My approach to politics is one of public service, and I believe that my experience makes me uniquely qualified to represent you on the park. I try to make the best decisions working for my constituents by listening to them, researching issues before the board, and balancing people's needs and desires in a way that achieves consensus. In conflict terms consensus, as a house of the government of the local golf course, I try to find a balance of our communities by listening to the residents and the advice of scientists and experts. One that park system is adapting to a changing climate and is sustainable for the long term. For our children,
Eric, could you turn up your volume a little, please?
I focus on always
It's difficult to hear.
Okay.
Oh, no, I can't hear anything.
Yeah, we can't hear any of this.
Yep, still nothing. Eric, can you hear us? We might be having technical difficulties here.
So it seems there's technical difficulties. I don't know if you can hear us, Eric.
Okay.
I just will interject while we're here. Yeah, we weren't able to hear the sound on the video,
Okay.
but I will just say while we're on the subject of park board, I do want everyone to know who's participating that the park board races are on your city convention ballot. So just in case you're wondering why you're not seeing park board candidates on your ward ballot, that's because they're part of the city convention. But we did invite the park board district candidates to speak because they're very localized to different parts of the city. So that's just why you're hearing from them today.
Okay, so yeah, I turned my sound off so I couldn't hear anything when Joanne mentioned that the sound off of my speaker was interfering, but you couldn't hear the video at all, you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. Boy, I want to be fair to Stephanie, but I also don't want to hold things up dealing with technical issues. Let's do this. But no, the share is not going to help because not many people are on that. Let's just deal with this later, and I'm going to encourage Stephanie to post this later on. And so I think let's move on with the city council candidates. So I'll stop sharing my screen here. Oops. There we go. All right. So each of the city council candidates is going to have a 5 minutes for an opening statement. And then we have questions. We had a lot more questions submitted than we have time for, of course. So what we've done is we've consolidated them, and each candidate will get 2 minutes to answer each question, and we're going to be alternating. So we flipped a coin. Willie gets the first statement. Then Andrew will make his opening statement. Then Andrew will answer the first question first. Willie answers the second question second, and so on. So all clear? I see nodding heads. Okay, good. All right. In that case, 5 minutes. Willie, you're off.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Willie Lee. My pronouns are they, them. And by the way, happy Pride. We still have a lot of work to do. I want to take a moment to thank all the people who have worked so hard to bring us this virtual caucus. The pandemic has really forced us into a lot of changes. And while there are bumps along the road, I'm really encouraged by how many people have signed up to participate. The previous system was born well before technology gave us so many tools to break down the barriers to participation. I myself found it hard to commit to all the time that previous caucuses required to have my voice be heard. In fact, I'm talking to you today from my childhood home in Florida. I'm here in my old bedroom. I've taken a week off to help my parents plan for the next stage in life. And so, yeah, thanks for all of that. Last year, after the murder of George Floyd, we saw our city rise up and demand change. A veto-proof majority of the city council stood up in Powderhorn Park and told the world that they would defund the police. And then we saw that momentum die. Some council members continued to lay out plans, reach out to the community, and start doing the work. Yes, for Minneapolis, gather tens of thousands of signatures to do what the Charter Commission tried to prevent. We saw media highlighting the acts of violence they failed to report in the past. We saw people advocate for a both-and position where we'd failed to reduce the harm that the MPD causes people of color in Minneapolis. We saw a retreat to white comfort. I'm running because the 12th Ward deserves someone who will step up and bring our voice to that fight. Big things change only when there's pressure and advocacy. That comes from the people, but it needs to be heard from council. Public support and momentum dies when it's not fed. Being in office gives you an automatic platform, and I believe it's vital to use that to compete, to keep us moving towards justice. I'm running because there's a lack of polling from our dwindling media landscape to gauge how residents really feel, and we mostly hear from the loudest voices. We look to campaign money raised as a proxy of support. We see media talking about all these groups that have formed to support the status quo, but we have no idea how many people they represent. We know they have money and access to power, but that shouldn't be the root of democracy. My favorite thing about ranked choice voting is that we can choose to support with our hearts first and practicality later. We no longer need to calculate who can win based on donations. Better yet, this choice is about endorsement, and we don't even have to settle. We can save that practicality until November. I want to come back to the idea of both and. We're hearing people talk about starting alternatives like mental health response teams while keeping the police as it is today. I want to be clear, defunding the police is not about an economic trade-off. It starts as harm reduction, reducing the amount of police interactions, reducing the times that it all goes wrong. Now, you may think that policing prevents crime because being arrested, charged, and punished is a deterrent. That you'd weigh the benefits of breaking the law against punishment and choose not to. But the problem is that the punishment side is broken, especially for people of color. People of color see themselves and their community bearing the brunt of this punishment, even when they do nothing wrong. Pretext traffic stops, nuisance laws, they bring you into a system that is a feedback loop. The next thing you know, you have parole violations, all for things that aren't even about public safety. Now you have a record, getting a job, renting an apartment. All of these are 100 times harder. This feedback cycle restricts your options, and it can feel like your only choices are ones outside the system, and the system further pushes back. Feedback cycles only stop when one of the factors let up. I believe that defunding the police and reimagining public safety reduces that feedback loop and makes us all safer as a result. Let's hit a few things we can do. First, I want 911 to ask on every call, do you need the police? And if the answer is no, we don't send police. If we find that increases the time to get a first responder to the scene, let's fund more first responders. I believe we need to decriminalize victimized crime, including drugs and sex work. I say decriminalize because when we create a legal framework for all of these things, we create more places to get right back into policing, right back into the same problems we've had before. I want armed police out of traffic enforcement. State law currently requires police for some of these functions, but it doesn't require that these officers be the same ones as today, the ones carrying guns, and we don't have to do that. We can find another way. This is just the start of the work, and I hope you send me to City Hall to make it real. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Willie. And Andrew, you're up next.
Well, thanks, Eric, and hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in and participating in this important process. Special thanks as well to Devin, Conrad, the Central Committee, and Ward 12 committees, and all the rest of the volunteers that made this possible. It's been really challenging with the pandemic, and they've put so much thought and effort into what has been, for most, an overall smooth process. For those that don't know me, my name is Andrew Johnson. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm honored to serve as your council member representing Ward 12. I was elected a little more than 7 years ago, and prior to that, I worked as an IT systems engineer, owned my own small business, and served as president of Longfellow Community Council. In my work at City Hall, I bring my perspective as a systems engineer. That means I think systematically about all the parts and how they interrelate. I approach issues with an open mind, listen to and consider other perspectives, and focus on what goals and outcomes we want rather than jumping to particular conclusions and solutions. I work to bring people together and have become known as being data-driven, bringing forward innovative ideas, and getting things done. We've been through a lot over the past year, and I want to thank all of you for the many ways as a community that you've stepped up in these moments. Personally, I can say it's been pretty humbling and quite a privilege to be in a position to work with you to make things better through these challenges. And I want to highlight a few of our successes. As the pandemic hit, the paid safe and sick leave ordinance, which I co-authored, helped protect more than 100,000 workers and their families. As we work to reimagine and transform our public safety system after the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police, my work that began in 2018 to develop alternative responses made it possible for us to invest in launching citywide mental health responder programs and other alternatives that are coming online over the next few months and help keep the momentum going on reimagining public safety. And after the uprising and civil unrest, I authored legislation to waive city fees and speed cleanup, helped bring a coalition together of community partners, and continue to pursue aid to help our small businesses and corridors rebuild. But as much as the last year and the issues as public safety have rightfully taken our focus, it's also important to acknowledge that the job of serving as your council member involves so much more. So I wanted to highlight some of our other successes. On housing, I've led the creation of hundreds of affordable units of rental housing, including deeply affordable and housing for those experiencing homelessness. On climate change, I am leading efforts to electrify our fleet of city vehicles and proud to have co-authored our aggressive goals for reaching 100% renewable energy by 2030. For the environment, I authored the ordinance to require commercial recycling and composting options and have sought innovative pilots for handling stormwater. We've integrated racial equity into all of our work, including the creation of a racial equity office, a strategic racial equity plan, and conducting racial equity impact analysis on our legislation. When it comes to public health, I led efforts to make Minneapolis the first city in the nation to ban perchloroethylene, a carcinogenic dry cleaning chemical. I'm currently working with my colleagues and health advisor appointee Jerome Evans to eliminate lead poisoning of children in our city. To help our small businesses, I established the Small Business Office, the Small Business Portal, and led efforts to eliminate dozens of ordinances and streamline processes as a way to support entrepreneurs and help create jobs and improve access to goods and services throughout our community. When it comes to transit, I've been leading efforts for winter snow and ice removal improvements, worked to get more ADA ramps installed, fought for transit funding, and I'm proud of our Complete Streets policy and transportation action plan. And so many other issues, from good governance initiatives like an open data portal policy, which I authored, to LGBTQ advocacy, including my ordinance change to legalize all gender restrooms and co-founding what is now the Trans Equity Council. But it's not just the big ward or citywide issues either. I know being a council member means working closely with residents and community organizations and making constituent service a focus. Each day I work on dozens of issues affecting residents. These may seem small or insignificant in the big picture, but they really matter in the lives of those affected. All of these highlights I mentioned are work that we have accomplished together, because I wouldn't be able to have worked on these important issues without your support. And that's why I'm asking for your support now, because we need to continue implementing good policies over this short 2-year term ahead that continue to improve the lives of residents in our city. I've enjoyed talking with hundreds of you over the past few months, but if we haven't connected, I would love to connect with you and hear directly what's on your mind. So please give me a call or send me an email. I'm available for you throughout this process as well as after for anything you need or want to discuss. I ask for your support and thank you again for being a part of this important process.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. All right. So Andrew, you also get the first question. And so this is a really broad question. So we're giving the candidates a chance to, if there's something that you want to address and don't want to have to worry about whether you get a relevant question, here's your opportunity, because this is really broad. What are your priorities for the ward and the city?
Thanks for the question, Eric. You know, the next 2 years ahead is a really short term because of redistricting. I think the key priorities right now are public safety and certainly continuing the efforts around reimagining and transforming this work. And I'm proud to be a leader on this, especially around alternative responses. I know we're going to have a lot of other public safety related questions, and so I'll save a lot of the other elements and pieces of this that are important for that work or those questions coming up. But in terms of other work, you know, it's really important as we work to rebuild from the civil unrest that was part of the uprising, that we make sure that we're not seeing our immigrant-owned and independent local small businesses being displaced. And I've really been fighting quite hard for getting aid for those small businesses and being able to bring people together to make sure that they're coming back into place and that tenants especially are not being displaced as part of this process, because there's a lot of tenants whose property owners don't necessarily want to continue having them in this space and are looking at it as an opportunity to profit, make money. And I think that we have an obligation to help all of those great local small businesses and tenants come back into the place. You know, the other piece of this is recovering from the pandemic. We know that getting shots in people's arms isn't enough. And fortunately, we're in a pretty good place with that. We still have more work to do for our Black, Brown, Indigenous, people of color in terms of disparities around vaccines. But the key thing is there's also the economic and financial recovery and the trauma-related recovery for our community as well. This has been a lot of workers left behind as a result of the impacts of COVID-19 and working both.
Andrew, please wrap up your answer.
Thank you. For the first and the second tranches of the ARP funding is going to be really critical, getting that money out the door. And even last week, we helped protect tenants from evictions with a pre-filing eviction notice.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Willie, did you want me to repeat that, or are you good? Oh, you're muted.
Well, besides being muted, I'm good. My priorities for the ward and the city, it shouldn't take any reading between the lines that the work to defund the police is the whole reason I'm here. It is the reason I chose to run. I looked around for someone to carry that torch and really bring kind of the force of the voice of the 12th ward to that fight. And that's the reason I'm giving, asking to give up a really comfortable life. I realize that the work of city council is a really, time and energy demanding job. And I'm grateful to have a bunch of people around me that support me in that. But defunding the police, finding new ways to really provide the things that don't require a threat of violence. And while we do that, reducing the impact. There's so much talk right now about trying to do both. And I think that misses the point. And so my priorities will always be to stay focused as we can on this. If I end up on some other committee, I'm sure we'll figure it out, right? I'll be real with you. I'm no studied politician. I'm just here because I really think that we need that energy, we need that advocacy, and we need to use that pulpit. Thank you.
Okay, and Will, you get to go first on this next question. Okay, given the city's rise in crime and need to change policing, what is your vision for a public safety program?
So we've talked a lot about this. The first thing I want to talk about is that overall, we've seen rates of violence across the entire country move. And so there's a lot of concern, especially I'm down here with my parents and like, here in Minneapolis, the crime rates are going really high. And it's just contextualizing that with the pandemic, economic situations across the country. All of that leads to this increasing rate. And I think that we need to start thinking about that whole notion that I talked about as the feedback loops of the public safety system. And so as we start to imagine how do we do these things, I don't think that continuing in the cycle of adding more police ever solves anything. Last night, we had someone murdered steps from the 1st precinct at 5th and Hennepin. The presence of police doesn't solve anything. And I think we really need to reduce that. As we're looking at ways that the city can do more, I think the 911 approach of really only dispatching the help that's needed so that you don't have to fear that calling for something like a medical emergency is going to bring that threat of violence to your home. Maybe your situation doesn't feel as safe when that's the case. And I don't want Minneapolis to be like that. So that's the nutshell. That's the high level thing. And yeah, thanks.
All right, Andrew, do you want me to repeat that?
Oh, no, I'm good, Eric. Well, thanks for the question. So our system today isn't working very well for anyone. Despite record funding in MPD over the past few years and decades of reform efforts, crime is too high. We keep having to pay millions of dollars in excessive force lawsuits that have real victims behind each settlement. And we know that there are unacceptable racial disparities in policing that are happening right now. Our current system is built around treating symptoms rather than addressing the root causes. We have to reimagine public safety and transform our system so that it works for all residents and takes a public health approach to the work. That means having different types of ways that we respond. Yes, I still believe there should be officers as part of the way we respond, but we also need to quit sending officers out to solve every problem in society, which is not their role, and and should not be their role, and is not what they're trained and equipped for. So much of the response work being done today can be done more efficiently and effectively by other professionals, whether mediators, civil enforcement staff, traffic control, mental health responders, using technology, or crime prevention specialists. And much of this work on alternative responses has already been begun as part of that 2018 budget amendment that I authored. And while responding to things is really important, we also know that if we're responding to something that's already started, there was a missed opportunity to prevent it from happening in the first place. That's why we need to invest more in crime prevention and interruption, both upstream before tensions escalate, and also downstream in order to stop the cycles of retaliation. These are strategies that have been proven successful in other cities, and we're investing in doing similar here and need to continue bringing these efforts up to scale. But beyond crime prevention, we need to do more to address the root causes of instability in our community and the lives of residents. We need every person in Minneapolis to have the support and resources to live a healthy and prosperous life. That's why we're making record investments in affordable housing, investing in job training and support, providing stability for students at home so they can focus in the classroom, increasing investments in marginalized communities that have faced historic disinvestment, and adopting other proven strategies. We need to continue building on this work. Transition will not happen overnight. It will not happen overnight, but I am committed to these efforts, and we are continuing to do more than ever before, and I know we can get there.
All right. So, Andrew, you get to go first with the next one. How do we get more of the new housing in our ward to be affordable? And can existing abandoned buildings be used for housing homeless?
That's a great question. So I believe in housing as a human right, and I helped lead the effort to create housing for those experiencing homelessness right here in Ward 12. Minnehaha Townhomes is located over by 54th Street and the light rail station. It's the first new construction public housing project in a generation in our city, and offers families experiencing homelessness 3-bedroom units for as low as $75 a month, along with additional support. I'm so proud of this project, and it's not the only one. We've got Amber Apartments going up right now, just north of Walgreens at 54th and Hiawatha, and we're looking at other sites as well for even more housing for those that are experiencing homelessness. When I've been down to encampments and I've talked with folks, one common barrier is that they don't necessarily want to move into apartments because they'll lose their sense of community and be alone and isolated. And that's why I'm so excited about Envision Community. It's an innovative model that's designed by those who've experienced homelessness. It comes with wraparound support, common shared space. It's about 1/10 the cost of creation and building, and it's in partnership with Hennepin Healthcare. I brought together stakeholders within City Hall early on in the process to figure out how we can legalize this model and pilot it. And I'm excited about seeing this model and Vivo as really groundbreaking opportunities to create new housing for those experiencing homelessness. It's worth mentioning that over the past year, we've put in more than $13 million into rapid rehousing, encampment support, street outreach, and shelter expansion. And we've worked with our partners to address barriers as well, and currently have the largest support system in the county's history. Yet we still have more to do. We also need to be thinking ahead as well, because just the other week, we took action in order to pass a pre-eviction filing notice, because we don't want to see a wave of individuals be evicted as a result of COVID-19 and the impacts that it's had on them. Everyone deserves safe and dignified housing. I'll continue to fight for those that are unhoused.
All right, Willie, did you want me to repeat the question?
That would be helpful.
Okay. How do we get more of the new housing in our ward to be affordable? And can existing abandoned buildings be used for housing homeless?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I want to thank Andrew for all the work that he's really put into this. I feel like the council and the county have really done an admirable job facing a really hard problem across the country. And I thank them for that. I think that that's really been a huge win for the city of Minneapolis and for the county and the state in general. And so, thank you. We need to do more of it, and we need to find that funding. And I totally agree. I think one of the big questions about vacant housing and whether you can turn that into available housing is like, how do we provide a way to make sure that vacant housing is safe? That legally we have the things in place, both like to do it out of regulation, but also so that people can, their homes are safe, whether that's physically safe or whether that's, a psychological safety. And we need to do a lot of imagining around that. And I haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about it, but I think that creative solutions like that and partnering with organizations that are already doing a lot of this work is really useful for kind of imagining what that next tier is. The other part of the question that I want to touch on is that we often talk about affordable housing in kind of a couple of different tiers. So when the city policy talks about the first bar to that being 60% of the median income in the city, median income being about $62,000. So 60% of that, $37,000. If you're working full time, that works out to you at $18, $19 an hour. The city estimates that that's about 50,000 households. We have about 170,000 households in the city. And so that's roughly 28% of Minneapolis households get kind of lumped into this idea that we're talking about there. There's another margin for deeply affordable housing and all of that. But I think that the question really starts thinking about affordable housing.
To wrap up your answer.
Sure, thank you. I think the question really comes back to what happens for everyone. And I fully support the rent control ballot question. And I think that that's a huge start to that. Thank you.
Okay, Willie, you go first with this one. How can we get more input from neighbors when a large housing project is being planned?
Yeah, this is like the question of politics, because I think a lot of times we hold all these openings and we have these forums, and then people don't show up, and then things start to happen and everyone gets really mad, right? And that's really problematic, because what happens is that a lot of times we go from fact finding and discussions to things that seem way too real, way too quickly. And I think that there's an opportunity for us to use a lot of the same strategies we've used in this caucus process to really not only bubble up ideas, but then to send them back and have that feedback loop to keep coming back around so that people know. I think it's important, and we all need to do a better job, but it's the hardest part of politics, getting people to show up before they feel like everything's ruined. Thanks.
All right, Andrew, do you want me to repeat that?
I got it. Thanks, though, Eric. I think this is one of the toughest parts, because land use applications in general by the city are not legislative. And so they're very mired in legal process that all goes back right into the US Constitution and property rights protections. And so one of the big issues here related to this is trying to get people to work up front and trying to get communication flowing before we end up seeing a project. Because what typically ends up happening in a lot of cases is a developer comes to the city or to the neighborhood association once they've already got a project that is 95% baked. And they know that they can, it conforms well to the zoning code, so they can get approval, because that's how land use applications are happen. They're not political decisions, they're quasi-judicial. And so it makes people feel like a lot of times those community meetings and the engagement is very inauthentic, because they provide their feedback and then the developer doesn't change anything about their projects. That's why I work, whenever I hear about any sort of rumblings of any project happening, I work to make sure that that developer gets out, connects with neighbors, door knocks neighbors and talks with neighbors first, early, before they start to really bake their plans, that they go to the neighborhood association, that they do a community meeting. So I push on them as much as I legally can to engage with the neighbors around them and with the neighborhood. And then as well, I always advocate through our neighborhood associations and with community to really work proactively. I think we can all look around and see the properties in the community that are probably really prime targets for development. And so neighbors should really work together to recruit, for instance, affordable housing developers, for instance, local entrepreneurs, to really pursue those projects rather than just waiting until we get a developer coming along. A developer coming along with their ideas. We should be pushing our ideas and trying to see what we want to see as neighbors next door and in our community.
Okay, and Andrew, you're first with this one. What should the parking requirements be for new business and multi-unit residential developments?
What should the parking requirements be?
Yes.
Okay, so we just passed a ordinance change, and what that does is it requires what are called transit demand management plans for certain size units, as well as minor transit demand management plans. And so basically, we have eliminated a minimum level of parking, but we are requiring different amenities related to transit, multimodal access in every single project. And I think this is a really positive thing because it's really requiring a lot more intention and thought. Now, I know some people say, well, it's unrealistic to have no parking in any project or any building. And let me tell you, there's not going to be in 99% of them because developers are still building parking. They have an economic incentive to do so in a lot of cases. But we are no longer setting an arbitrary minimum floor that is causing an overproduction in a number of areas. In fact, I talked to a developer that was off of our light rail line who has a building, and they can't get all of their units of underground parking leased out. And we know those have a cost. I mean, structured parking can cost $50,000, up to $50,000 per stall for a car. And you better believe that that money ends up getting added into people's rent. And so when we look at the total picture here, we want our community to be more accessible through different modes of transit. There's still a place for cars in that. The market will, we believe, better adjust to that. And we're also really encouraging through this ordinance change a lot more thought into the different ways that builders and developers can contribute to multimodal transit access.
Okay, Willie, did you want me to reread that?
No, I'm fine on that. And this is definitely a place where Andrew and I completely agree. The work that came out of the council for that was really important to address this climate crisis we're in. We have to talk about, we can't talk about transit without talking about the climate response. And, for our city to grow in a responsible way, and for us to provide housing and amenities in a responsible way, we have to do something to take care of those emissions. And I think that the new ordinance does a great job of that. So I fully support it, and I don't really think that there's much that needs to change at this point. Thank you.
Okay, Willie, you go first now. Do you support the charter amendment to replace Minneapolis' weak mayor system with a strong mayor system like St. Paul?
Oh, heavens no, I do not. I think one of the things that's really important to me is that the wards are very different in character. And the mayor's office generally gets elected by a large contingent of rich white people. And I really think that centralizing more of that control in the mayor's office really continues to marginalized communities. And so I don't support that. I think that there are definitely some challenges to the way that the system works today, but they're not insurmountable challenges. I think the other thing that we hear a lot about is people unironically point to this strong mayor thing and the whole idea of 14 different bosses or whatever and say that's how the police failed. But that is the one department in the city that reports to the mayor. And so I have a really hard time with that. That doesn't make any sense to me. And so, no, I did not support that. Thank you.
Okay, Andrew, you want me to repeat that?
No, I got it. And Willie and I agree on this. I don't support either. It seems to me like a solution in search of a problem. I think it made sense for the Charter Commission to take a look at different models and structures. I appreciate the research they did. But when I look at the research, it's also pretty clear that there's no perfect model and that they all come with different trade-offs. And our model today is inherently more democratic. So why change it? There's this argument that it'll be easier for department heads because they won't need to engage with different stakeholders. But I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, especially when departments generally are performing well under this structure, with the exception being MPD, which Willie noted doesn't follow the same reporting structure as other departments. Another problem is that being mayor is an insanely busy job. As a council member on a quiet week, I'm lucky if it's less than 60 hours a week worth of work. But being mayor is even more demanding. So there will inherently be less attention on many issues if this change happens. And so what Willie mentioned around marginalized communities is absolutely true, because that's where the huge risk comes in, is that they could get not enough attention and there won't be any consequence, because whoever is mayor can get elected without the votes from those communities. And finally, I think it will really harm constituent service. If your street doesn't get plowed, I tell Public Works that they need to get back out there and fix it. Under this proposed language, I would no longer be able to do that. You'd have to try and get the mayor's attention to solve it. Whether whoever is mayor makes constituent service a priority will dictate whether folks get help or not. And even if it is a big priority for them, I expect you'll see a bottleneck occur. So as well-intentioned as this may have been, I don't think it's a good idea. And I encourage voters to vote it down, just like the people of Austin, Texas recently did with a similar proposal.
All right. And Andrew, you're still up. What can the city do to fight climate change?
Oh, that's a great question. We can do quite a few things on that. We've set aggressive goals, both in terms of municipalizing our electrical sourcing from 100% renewables. And we are quickly expanding community solar subscriptions and doing that work there. We are working to, and we need to continue to hold Excel and CenterPoint accountable for progress on working to get our entire grid for all Minneapolis residents to 100% renewable. I'm working personally on electrifying our fleet of city vehicles and building the infrastructure out so that people can more easily get electric vehicles as part of their portfolio. But we know climate change is about so much more than just electricity. It's about all of our infrastructure and everything we're looking at. So this is about storm water systems and making permeable asphalt that can absorb and recharge groundwater rather than trying to centralize and strain that all out. This is about protecting our pollinators and working on local food production right here so that we have a more resilient community as we have these extreme temperatures as we've all been living through this weekend, which frankly is really unfortunate because we shouldn't have this level of variability. We also know that climate change is an intersectional issue that affects the most marginalized communities in the most profoundly negative ways. And so as we're doing this work, we need to make sure that our investments are targeted and prioritizing communities that have historically been disinvested in and that are going to be most impacted first as a result of climate change. And that also includes looking through an impact of air pollution analysis. That includes the urban heat island effect. It's all around solid waste and recycling. And so there's so many different ways that we can play a role. I'm proud of our climate action plan. I'm proud of our aggressive goals on this and the investments that we're making, but we need to continue to do more and build on this work.
Okay, Willie, do you want me to repeat that?
No, thank you. Again, another issue we mostly agree on. I think the points that Andrew bring up are really great ones, and it's a lot of great work that's happened through the city. I feel like, the biggest challenge to, kind of running right now is that I believe that the city has done a really great level of service for a lot of progressive things, but that's so unequal. And the inequalities across the city of Minneapolis are some of the worst in the nation. And so I really think about how the work that we do, really impacts that. And so whether that's the roof depot site and kind of some of the issues there where the city had proposed to centralize all of its water utility maintenance to that space, but the community had a very different opinion of what should happen to that space, and something really rooted in community and being able to have some urban farming and to really get us back to some really great roots. And I think plans like that are really important to that. I think that also, as someone who is primarily a cyclist and also a transit user when it's not a pandemic, I think that really making that more usable throughout the year and really making that feel safe to people who just aren't aggressive cyclists is really important to reducing overall climate challenges in the city, because people do the easiest thing. And when cycling isn't the easiest, or when transit isn't the easiest because it's 30 minutes between buses, like they're gonna choose other choices. And the job of government, the job for all of us, is to make the right choice the easy choice, and systematically move people to kind of take that collective action. Winning this one by one is something we've tried for a really long time, and it's just not going to get us there.
Okay, Willie, you're still up. What changes need to be made in transit in the ward?
Oh man, I got a million things to say about transit in the ward because I am primarily a transit and cycling person. I got a couple of things, and I'm going to talk about the weirdest one first. I don't know if it's the weirdest, but when we plow the streets, there are mountains of snow at the intersections and the bus stops, and they're impassable to our residents who require more accessibility. I have a neighbor and who needs that, and several of us get together and shovel out the bus stops that we know she uses. And that shouldn't be just because neighbors believe in her safety. That should be a city responsibility. Maybe jointly with the Metro Council, Metro Transit and the Met Council, but somebody needs to do that. We need to be able to expand that. The other thing I mentioned briefly moments ago is really looking at headways. How much time is in between buses to make it seem convenient? When that time is really high, over half an hour, people are disincentivized to taking that. And I think it's really important for us to kind of look at that balance. A lot of people talk about free transit, and I'm kind of behind it, but when we look at studies, the thing that increases usage of transit more is better headways. And so if that's the trade-off that we need to make, I think that making the transit system more robust in those headways is more important than some of the other things. And so maybe we target free fares to those who need it, but leave fares the way they are for those who can afford it, so that we can have those better headways, that we can make it more convenient, make the bus the first choice. Thanks.
Okay, Andrew, want me to repeat that?
Oh, no, I'm good, Eric. I really appreciate the ideas that Willie brought up on this. And also, I'm really glad we have BRT and LRT in the ward as well. But we know we got to do more on this. One of the transit issues I'm most passionate about and have been working on is that snow and ice clearance in the winter. I mean, we are a winter city for at least 4 months out of the year. And it is, to me, wrong that it only takes one person who does not shovel for a block to be completely impassable to someone who's unable to get around that. And then there's these berms, there's poor clearance in a lot of our bike lanes in terms of snow removal. And so I've worked with Public Works on really ramping up both the support services, the communication and the education, as well as doing process improvements and increased enforcement around this. And all of this is really looking at, can our existing system today work to get the results, or do we need to go to a municipalized snow and ice clearance program? And I co-authored the amendment to study that topic. Public Works staff came back with a preliminary report, and that's really the direction we are heading if we cannot make our existing system work, which I think the jury is still out on from a Public Works standpoint. But I'm going to continue to do that work around that. ADA ramp rollout, I've led some policy improvements on that, and we need to continue to do more there so that our city is truly accessible for all of our residents. And another piece is around protected bikeways, expanding upon that. And then finally, I want to mention crossing Hiawatha, right? It divides Ward 12, but it's not great to cross. It's not great for users of it. And for whether you're a bicyclist or a pedestrian, there are more opportunities there. I've been very active in reaching out to Met Council, and I'm going to continue to push on that so that it's more usable and safer for all of our different modes.
All right, we've got time for one more question. And Andrew, this goes to you. What is a better process for coping with mental health issues than having to call police for everything?
Well, so certainly I am very encouraged and excited about the rollout of our citywide mental health responder program. And so that is going to be online, it looks like, in July. So we're very close to that. It is a more than 2-year in the works effort that came out of this analysis of 911 calls, which is a result of my 2018 budget amendment. We had a lot of different partners at the table and looked very broadly at how this works in other cities, what the best practices are out there. And probably most importantly, one of the things I appreciate the most is that we actually went out and did extensive in-depth conversations with those who use these services, who need to rely on mental health responders, whether that's calling for a family member, whether that's working with a neighbor or someone that they know, and making sure that we're really focused on harm reduction, that we're focused on how we assist that individual with as much care as possible. And then, another piece of all of this is, I think is really important that we're talking about this and that we don't stigmatize mental health. I mean, most adults in the United States will at some point suffer from a mental health issue. This is something that affects all of us. It's a public health issue. And we need to support our neighbors, our friends, our family, and ourselves through this. And so we need the systems in place that provide appropriate responsive care. And it's been done in other cities. It can be done safely. I think one of the unfortunate parts is sometimes talking about the mental health responder program, people stigmatize it as, oh, these are dangerous people. We have seen results from other cities that this can be done effectively without bringing weapons into the equation. If we are doing that training, which we are, of 911, doing that triage and understanding the situation and going in there with trained professionals.
Okay, Lily, do you want me to repeat it?
No, thank you. I definitely appreciate the work that's gone into this so far, and I really do think that that it's really getting there, and that the things that I would stress and that really are differentiators is that we really need to spend that focus thinking about how do we create systems that prevent that prevent us from sending police to those responses. And so as the mental health response teams scale up, thinking about how 911 can really create processes so that we never get the wrong squad there. And that's key, right? Like the question has two parts, and I'm just like laser focused on the second part. Like, how do we prevent the harm? Andrew mentions harm reduction a number of times, and I think that's absolutely spot on. We have to start from like, how do we keep people safe? Not how do we like get other people away so that the people who called maybe feel a little safer because they're gone, but that doesn't help the person in crisis. I think we also need to invest heavily in really affordable mental health treatment and really do the outreach to get to people and bring them into a place where they can get that care. We talk a lot about the root causes, and this is definitely a place where we can do so much more, and that an investment in some of the things that we start scaling away from existing police funding can make that a lot safer for everyone, both the person, both the community and the person suffering from crisis. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, candidates. It's 5 o'clock. So thank you to both of you. Thank you to Charles Rogers. And I apologize again. I suspect that was my screw up there with the video from Stephanie Music. So I'll reach out to her and see if I can make that up somehow I can help her post it or something. I'll see what she needs. So apologies there. Thanks to everybody else. And good luck to the candidates. Oh, and a reminder to all the delegates. So voting goes through midnight on June 8th. That's a couple days from now. I'll remind you about what Devin mentioned. So you can vote as many times as you want because only the last vote will count. I know that probably Republicans want to cut off part of that system. You can vote as many times as you want, see what Democrats do. No, only the last vote counts. And with that, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.